Still inflated. The White House spins the latest report on consumer prices. Another government inflation report today naturally triggers another White House press release presenting the central failure of the Biden presidency as some sort of generational triumph. After the historic consumer price pain of this era, Tuesday's relatively good news is that overall inflation met expectations with a modest decline. The Department of Labor reports. The Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, CPIU, rose 0.4% in February on a seasonally adjusted basis, after increasing 0.5% in January, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported today. Over the last 12 months, the All Items Index increased 6% before seasonal adjustment. But BLS admits that the core inflation measure beloved by so many government economists is not moving in the right direction. The index for all items less food and energy rose 0.5% in February, after rising 0.4% in January. Bank of America observes in a research note. Over the last 3 months, core CPI has increased at a 5.2% annualized rate, its highest reading since October 2022, as underlying inflation remains well above the Fed's target. In our view, the report continues to illustrate the sticky inflation problem the Fed is currently facing. White House staff can hold off on ordering any mission accomplished banners. The Bernie veto. Anyone hoping for better leadership at the National Institutes of Health after the COVID era is bound to be disappointed. And it's not just because urgently needed new House oversight and relatively low pay make the job unappealing for some top scientists. It seems that America's most famous wealthy socialist is ruling a huge segment of the population engaged in medical research out of the applicant pool. The journal's Liz Esley White and Stephanie Armour report. The top job at the National Institutes of Health, a prestigious role that has attracted a Nobel Prize winner and other leading scientists, is going unfilled as candidates back out. Among the factors that have complicated the search for a director is the Senate Health Committee, which would vet any choice and is led by Senator Bernie Sanders, I.V.T., who would be expected to disapprove of any potential candidate with ties to the pharmaceutical industry. Every Democratic senator should be asked whether they support such discrimination against people with experience in the real economy that ultimately funds NIH and every other part of government. Guess who else got a bailout? In the South China Morning Post, Zhou Xian opines on the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. While SVB does not rank among the U.S. banking industry's top 10 institutions, it has played an important role for Chinese tech startups. They have used SVB for years as their default bank to open offshore accounts to handle funding received from U.S. private equity and venture capital investors. Even after going public, these Chinese enterprises continued to maintain their offshore accounts at the Santa Clara, California-based bank. Besides easing the flow of U.S. money into Chinese startups, SVB essentially served as a safe harbor for China's rich tech elite to park their offshore wealth. But the speed of SVB's collapse caught many of its Chinese clients off guard, with literally no time to respond when the Federal Deposit Insurance Corp seized the bank's assets and ordered its closure last Friday. Travesty. Your humble correspondent did not watch the Academy Awards broadcast on Sunday and therefore cannot opine on whether the program included more or less than the usual level of insufferable wokeness. But anyone can see that the event included an appalling oversight in its review of contributors to the motion picture industry who passed away in the last year. Mitchell Northam writes in USA Today. In this year's In Memoriam montage, there was no mention of Paul Sorvino, the great American actor who died in 2022 at the age of 83. Most of us will remember Sorvino for teaching us how to slice garlic with a razor blade. Indeed, the performance Sorvino is most remembered for is playing Paulie Cicero in Goodfellas. As Cicero, Sorvino plays a quiet but ruthless mob boss who takes Ray Liotta's Henry Hill under his wing. Cicero is based on the real-life gangster Paul Vario, who was a made guy in the Lucchese crime family. This column tries to keep its composure but must admit to being starstruck upon meeting the gracious Sorvino years ago in a Fox green room. After Sunday's glaring mistake at the Oscars, are movie fans supposed to just forget about it? Still inflated. The White House spins the latest report on consumer prices. Another government inflation report today naturally triggers another White House press release presenting the central failure of the Biden presidency as some sort of generational triumph. After the historic consumer price pain of this era, Tuesday's relatively good news is that overall inflation met expectations with a modest decline. The Department of Labor report